Hello everyone, and welcome to the first edition of a new video series I'm producing called Astrology for a Better Life. Today I'm here with Anthony Picco, a veteran astrologer. Significant because today is actually Veterans Day. He's here today to talk to us a little bit about his own practice and how he helps people use astrology to live a better life. So Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about why you began practicing astrology?
Well, you know, it's a funny thing. You asked that question specifically about practicing because I got into astrology and you're just playing with it at first. And what happened was I dragged one of my friends over and I said, let me do your chart. And I thought I knew my friend. And I was looking at the chart and there's a little bad stuff in it. Like, not really bad, but you know what I mean. And I didn't mention it when I did his reading. I talked to him all about this good stuff, and he looked at me and he said, isn't there anything else in that chart? And I said, yeah, well, and I launched this stuff about his childhood and all this horrible stuff. And he just burst. I knew the guy for 5 years. He never told me a single thing. He just suddenly opened up. He talked about all this stuff. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, I'm going to have to trust astrology more than myself. But it also set him on a path. He actually started studying enough astrology that he could look at his past and start analyzing it. It was a little easier for him to deal with the past when he saw it in relationship to astrology. Like, oh, well, my moon was conjunct this and it was square that. That's why my mom was a problem, or whatever it was. And it made it easier for him to approach some of the hairy stuff from his own childhood that he just stayed away from until that point. So that right off the bat, I'm like, wow, look what can be done with this. And I wasn't even trying. And I am a Capricorn, so efficiency and usefulness comes in very handy. So that's what got me into wanting to help people. I didn't necessarily think of it in those terms, but I was helping people.
So it sounds like your friend had one of those classic transformative moments that I think astrology can really provide for a lot of people, right?
It's the options, the possibilities there, yeah.
Yeah. How else do you see in your own practice astrology being useful to clients?
Well, you know, one thing I want to mention off the bat is that any beginning astrology reading, they're usually not shocked by anything they're hearing. What they're shocked by is how clearly it's stated. Most people kind of know who they are. But what I find really helpful on a very simple way, sometimes you can see a pattern in the chart where they always get into trouble when they do this. And so they always do A plus B and then they go to C. And sometimes as an astrologer you can say, you know, if you look over here in your chart, you've got something else here and you can do B and C first and then go back to A and it won't explode on you. You know, you want to try to get people out of their patterns.
Yeah.
Because that's when the challenges come in a chart, it's usually because there's a pattern that's kind of stuff that you really have to take control of. There's challenges and lessons in a chart. I mean, you really have to learn to work with what you have. So on some level, if somebody comes to me and says, I'm trying really hard to be an artist, and you look in their chart and it's like, you know, you really might be better off being an accountant, you know, and I'm making an exaggerated statement, but you can advise people on how best to manifest what they have, you know, and that's really gratifying on a really positive level. It's like, oh, you do this and this, you can add some of this in.
Right.
You could expand it more.
So you're really giving people more options and possibilities.
In the context of who they are.
Right.
It's not like I'm turning and saying, well, you know, you can become a jet pilot. If it's not in their chart, I'm not going to tell them that.
Right.
But I'm going to say, you know, I see what your strengths are, and here's other ways you may not have looked at doing the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, using the same energies available to you in the chart that you might have had otherwise. So
More options and more possibilities for who they already
they already are, yeah.
who they already are. So how have you seen that play out practically in different areas of people's lives?
Well, sometimes an astrology reading is really just a great affirmation for a person. You read their chart, and you know, like, it looks like you're really doing great with your chart. And they leave just more certain and more secure. I had somebody call me up and say that they felt easier about things because they know they're on the right path. They know they're doing what they need to, you know, what they should be doing, or they're working with the parameters of that. And so they feel really comfortable. Other people have struggled with the challenges, I find. But you end up giving them specific suggestions. I've seen very spiritual people who have trouble because they get walked on by other people. And I try to explain to them, well, what makes you so spiritual is you see the pure soul inside a person.
Yeah.
And you miss that right now that soul's an idiot. And you're trying to work with them. And idealistically, they're so pure inside that they see this purity and then they get used by other people. And you want to try to explain to them, you need to learn to filter who you're letting into your life. Because they're so kind of pure, they just open their arms up and then people come running in. So you want to learn to help them understand how to balance the parts in their chart that are not automatically balanced. And let me explain by that. There are things in your chart that flow very naturally.
Yeah.
There's always in everybody's chart an area where you can just say, this part of your life, like banking, don't worry about it. Finances will always be easy for you. I'm not one of those people, but
neither am I.
But you also might see people and it's like, you know what? When it comes to authority figures, you have issues. Maybe you should start your own company. Because, and so we have been fired from 3, it's like, well, that's because you keep fighting with authority figures. So then you can turn this up and say, start your own company. Stop fighting with everybody. Stop making them your father or your mother or whatever it might be and learn to become your own authority. So these are the kind of ways you can shift people out of bad patterns.
Yeah.
They might be rebellious authority kind of quality in their chart, and they may take all the fighting they did from their childhood with their teachers and parents and then bring it to work, and that's not going to help them unless they start their own business or do it themselves. So those are the kind of, I could go on for hours, but those are the kind of things you can tell somebody. You can tell somebody, don't rush into relationships because you're a little too idealistic.
Yeah.
You're a little too, this person's wonderful. And then 6 months later, it's like, no, they're not. How did I not see it? It's because,
Neptune in the 7th house.
Neptune's in the 7th house or conjunct Venus or whatever. So that's the real benefit I see, is it teaches you how to use, ideally a good astrologer will teach you how to use what you have in a more efficient and useful day-to-day manner.
So when people come to you for the first time, can you sort of tell
Oh, yeah.
what's happening in their life and
Yeah.
why they're coming to you?
It's the only time I can't tell is when somebody gets an astrologer reading as a gift, because then they just come to you random. When people seek out an astrologer, there's usually something going on in their chart that has got a bug up their butt, and they've got to deal with it, and they can't deal with it. And usually you see it in the chart. I had somebody the other day who came to me. She had Uranus, transiting Uranus on her moon, and transiting Saturn on her nadir and Neptune at the bottom. And everything about home and emotions was erupting all over the place, and she couldn't make sense out of it. And I was able to sit and say, well, you see, this is upsetting this, and this is inspiring this, and this keys into some stuff from your childhood over here that you maybe haven't dealt with, and that's what happens. Or Pluto's a big, Pluto transits bring people in like crazy. Pluto on the sun, Pluto on the moon, Uranus, of course, because it's so surprising. The Neptune transit people come in because they're like, what's astrology all about? And they're kind of a little more mystical.
Confused.
Yeah, a little confused, a little curious. They're not driven the way like a Uranus or Pluto, or even for that matter, a Saturn transit can bring in somebody. Because Saturn can be a bit repressive and make you focus and cut out the excess. And I'll tell you, Americans hate cutting out the excess. I'm being a little general there, but people hate having to do their homework. And Saturn makes you do your homework. And if you don't know, I knew one woman who, over the past 3 years, had Saturn go over like 5 of her planets in her chart. Well, she came to me when Saturn was leaving the last planet. I'm like, I wish she'd come to me 2 years ago. Because the last 2 years wouldn't have seemed as bleak if you knew Saturn was asking certain questions of you as it transited. That's the gift.
Yeah, so there are all these cycles. Perhaps we should just go back for those who are completely new and just reference a chart, right?
Okay, there's a typical chart.
Typical astrological chart. And there we are, right? A person would be in the center of this on Earth.
Yeah, the Earth is in the middle of the chart.
In the center. And so you mentioned the 4th house, for example. So
Down here.
yeah, we want to make sure we explain to people that every house represents a different area of life. And in the case of the 4th house,
Home, mother, your inner sense of self is a good way to put it.
right, and you mentioned that this client had Uranus
On their moon,
On
which
their moon.
rules the 4th house.
which rules the 4th house. So every planet playing a role,
Yes.
playing a function.
And having automatic connections around the chart.
Right, and then we start to see clients coming in because the planets then start to interact with each other.
It's like a pinball machine sometimes.
Like a
The
pinball.
planets are bing, 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 bing. and come to astrology.
So can we talk a little bit about some of the universal cycles that everyone will be experiencing at different stages of their lives, no matter
At
who they
different
are, what their
stages,
chart
and
is?
yet the same age for everybody. Like, for example, Jupiter returns to where it was when you were born every 12 years. So every 12 years you have a cycle of kind of wanting to grow and expand. And that means when everybody's 12, they get a Jupiter return. When everybody's 24, they get a Jupiter return. And on. You can do the math yourself. So that's the regular cycle that you can count on without even knowing astrology. Every 12 years, expect to open up and be more open to receiving more information and learning. Saturn cycle is the most notorious one. Every 28, 29 years, you get your Saturn return. And that's the first one is when you grow up and you become kind of an adult, you arrive. But even the Saturn cycle can be broken down into 4 7-year periods.
Yeah.
So, and if we had a lot more time, I could lecture for half an hour on that alone. But they're all sequences of doing your homework and taking stock of yourself. And then at 29, you become an adult, and then you go through all it again, and then around 58 or 59, you have your second Saturn return, which is really kind of act 2 of your life, where you begin stuff. And the other one too, the Uranus opposition is kind of like your astrological midlife crisis. Around 40 years old, Uranus gets halfway across the solar system, and it becomes a question about what's your personal freedom, what are you doing, what changes do you need to make in your life to be me more than whatever you want me to be. So those are the kind of the regular cycles that everybody has around the same time. Okay.
And so those are the longer transits and cycles. What can people do in their everyday lives, day to day?
Well, if you get an astrology reading, you can become aware of what your habits are. One of the things we can learn in astrology, particularly with the difficult lessons, is where you keep making the same mistake, and you realize that thing can be adjusted. It's the old thing about how you walk down the road and there's a pothole and you fall into it. And every day you keep walking down the road and falling into the pothole. At some point, you can learn to go around the pothole, and eventually maybe even learn to take a different path and not even go down a road with potholes. And that's what we kind of look at with changing patterns in astrology. It's like, all right, so you have a difficult time sharing your emotions in your chart. Let's say that's there. Well, you can be encouraged to share them because you can see, other parts of your chart will benefit from it. So maybe you need to be a little uncomfortable and take some risks and take it in a different direction. The big issue is really overcoming programming from childhood.
Yeah.
We can often see what happens in childhood, and the question becomes, how do we get them to take that to a different level and not do it the same way over?
For more with Anthony S. Picco, tune into his weekly radio show, Cosmic Tuesdays, at www.hazyradio.com.